It's official. I'm in my researching era. I knew that it was a good place when I walked in and they started playing Cleopatra by the Lumineers. Just wanted to share with you what kind of things I'm researching today. It's official, I'm in my researching era. It's researching time. Hi, hello, my name is Taylor. I'm an aspiring author, screenwriter, and playwright who just finished my first draft of a YA Rivals to Lovers contemporary romance novel. And now, it's official, I'm in my researching era. As I continue to chip away on the first draft of a science fiction fantasy novel that I have been working on now for over a year, I am going to start a new project that I've had waiting in the wings, and this one requires a lot of research. This may be one of the most bookish days in the life of a writer that you may ever see, because in addition to doing lots of research today, we're going to be going to an independent bookstore. I have been trying to go to as many independent bookstores as I can this summer, so I am very excited to be checking another one off my list. But first, let's talk a little bit more about this new project. For the first time, I am going to be delving into a historical fiction project. This project is set in the mid-1980s in the Washington, D.C. area-ish. Is that where Quantico is? The project is set in mid-1980s Virginia and follows the lives of two undercover agents. So in order to have an ounce of a clue of what I am writing about, and to not just sit there and make it up, I need to get a much better idea of what life was like in mid-1980s America, what the culture was of the Washington, D.C. area in the mid-1980s. I need to get an idea of what it was like for these characters to grow up and how those decisions have informed them now in the 1980s. I say that like it's now. I need to get an idea of what these characters' lives were like growing up, what their family structures would have been, and how that was all influenced by the time that they were raised in and the time that they are living through in the novel. Not to mention, a lot of this novel is going to rely on past events that have impacted the characters, their lives, and their work. So, for example, I'm going to be researching lavender marriages of the 20s and 30s, as well as the lavender scare of the 50s. And hopefully by some point in the future, this will all come together to be a nice historical fiction novel. So come along and let's go book shopping, hopefully enjoy some aesthetic drinks, and kick off the research era. When I was first doing the very initial planning of this novel, knowing that I wouldn't get to it until later on, that being now, I did some very surface level research, just looked at a couple different websites trying to figure out when exactly I wanted this to happen. Now I have my year pinpointed, where I wanted it to happen, what jobs I wanted these people to have, but I truly started doing research the other night. I sat down and really started doing a deep dive into some of the topics, and so now I have a list of websites and such that I have not yet delved into. So before we go to the bookstore, let's do a little more of some reading and note-taking. I'm starting with articles because they're most accessible to me. I'm doing some more mainstream articles, then I'm going to delve a little more into the academic side. And all the while, I am working on getting together a list of books that I might want to check out or explore at the local library. So fingers crossed that this remains as organized as it sounds, and those dogs barking outside is a good precursor to how this is probably gonna go. Okay, surprise bookstore hopping. We're now going to another bookstore. I am back from the bookstores, and honestly that whole thing kind of felt like a fever dream. That first bookstore was so incredible. I've wanted to go there for a while, so it was really great to get to see it. The vibes were beyond incredible. All the shelving and the interiors looked so nice. It was like this little wonderland of books. They had like a little romance section cut out between the fiction, and everything was just broken up and categorized so nicely. I knew that it was a good place when I walked in and they started playing Cleopatra by the Lumineers. The vibes were just incredible. The first book that I got at the bookstore was actually outside on like a value display table, and it's called An Honest Living by Dwyer Murphy. This book is all about an attorney who leaves a prestigious law firm, picks up odd jobs, and then ends up getting a job with a client who asks him to track down her missing husband, who's an antique bookseller. It turns out that this woman has stolen someone's identity. The real woman shows up on the attorney's doorstep and has some questions about these novels and booksellers. It takes place in New York during the rare book trade, and it sounds fascinating. So I'm really excited. It's a combination of book and law that's sort of like a mystery thriller, and I'm really excited to read this. So while I was browsing some of the books, my mom, who was with me, came up to me and said, "Look, I found this book that you've been looking for." And she brings me this copy of Pan by Michael Clune, which I believe is a new release. And I said, I have never seen this book, I have never heard of this author, I have never seen the cover, nothing. But then she read me the inside, and it's about this 15-year-old who starts having panic attacks, and then along with his friends he starts investigating if the Greek god Pan is actually trapped inside of his body. He explores this idea of consciousness and self-awareness through Oscar Wilde, Charles Baudelaire, Bach, rock and roll, and all these different thrilling locations. And honestly, it sounds right up my line. I'm currently reading Song of Achilles. I love Hadestown, so I am interested in Greek mythology. I love all different types of mixed media stuff like this. The idea of combining Bach with rock music and Oscar Wilde and doing sort of a mesh of all these different things is just really fascinating. Yes, this is a 2025 release. As of recent, there's been 2 books that I've been shopping for. One of them I've actually been looking for about a year now, The Chosen and the Beautiful, which is a reimagining of The Great Gatsby. Neither bookstore had it. And before you say, oh, why don't you get it online? I am now so committed to finding this in person, in a store, on a bookshelf. You don't understand, this is a full-time commitment now. So didn't have it today, but the second bookstore that we went to, which had a very different vibe than the bookstore that we first went to, but this one had people with dogs. It was very much a community feel. You know, people were just stopping in to visit, hang out, talk, and all that. But they had a book that I've been looking for and have been very excited to get my hands on. And that book would be Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. This is the first book in the series. Every time I go into a bookstore now and I'm actually actively looking for this book, I find like book 5, book 2, book 3. I never find the first book. So here it is, at last, the first book. Dungeon Crawler Carl is a wacky, really fun, apocalypse-y sort of book about a Coast Guard vet and his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donut, trying to survive the end of the world, but it's very much like a video game. It goes through the galaxy, there's potions and exploding goblins and deadly drug-dealing llamas. So it's sort of like a game show, really wacky, cross of genres and different things. So I've been really wanting to delve into this series, and I was so happy when I finally found the first book so I can get going with Dungeon Crawler Carl. While I was shopping around, I also saw a new release that caught my eye. Literally came out at the beginning of this month, July 1st. It's called The CIA Book Club: The Secret Mission to Win the Cold War with Forbidden Literature by Charlie English. And this made me think of the book that I'm researching. So I might add it to the list. It's not fully related to what I'm doing, but it's enough that it could give me some background information on what these characters are experiencing. So I might kind of poke around that idea, see if I can find some articles on it, and I'll definitely be keeping my eye on this book. One of the reviews says it reads like a spy novel, so even though it's real accounts of what was happening in a real, researched topic, it apparently reads in a very interesting way, and the topic would be definitely something to check out given what I am working on at the moment. And on that note, I think it's time to pick up where we left off and do some more research. Alright. It is time for a little update. Did some more research, had some dinner. It's now 7-ish. It's probably after 7 now. But I've been focusing my research today primarily on William H. Webster, who was the FBI director during the time that this book takes place in the mid-1980s. Fun fact, he is, I believe, at this point still the only person to ever be the director of both the FBI and the CIA. He was first invited to be the director of the FBI, then later on he was asked to also be the director of the CIA 10 years into his time with the FBI. So I've been learning some cool stuff about that. Now I'm trying to make sure that my camera's in focus. So I definitely want to do some more research on what the culture was of the FBI at that time, what it was like having him as the director, having things, shifting, trying to get over one of the prior directors, damaging kind of culture and the stuff that he did, especially in terms of the, anti-gay agenda that he held. What was his name? J. Edgar Hoover. I'm learning history here, folks. That is essentially what I've been focusing on today. I also did a little more research on this group that the FBI investigated. That group was called the Madeline Society. They had a chapter in LA as well as a chapter in Washington, D.C., and they were one of the first gay groups that the FBI did undercover detection on. So I'm learning some different stuff about that and how all of those investigations and the way that the LGBTQ community was criminalized and sought after by the FBI, how that would have impacted both of my characters, especially one of them who is leaning towards being more vulnerable, he's more afraid, whereas the other one is more confident in who he is and his place in society. So, been learning some interesting stuff there. I'm gonna do a little bit more research now, then I think I'll do some stretching. I've been trying to incorporate 15-20 minutes of yoga into my night times. It's only been 3 days, so we'll see how long that lasts, but gonna do a little bit more research, then do some stretching, and I'll catch you there. I'll catch you then. I'll catch you after that, yeah. Alright, did my stretching, did a little more research, and I actually read this really fascinating article on JSTOR Daily, and it was about James Baldwin. I think I'm gonna link it in the description because I found it really fascinating. It was all about how he, as a homosexual black activist for LGBTQ rights and for black rights, was targeted by the FBI and how it impacted his writing and his psychological state, and how he and other activists were targeted in order to propel the FBI's goals. So I thought that was really, I know I keep saying it was fascinating, but as a reader and as a writer, one of my favorite books that I read this year had to have been Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. It was my first James Baldwin book, and it's really stuck with me, and I definitely want to read more of his work. In fact, I almost bought one of his books today at the bookstore. So to get to read, how he was impacted by the FBI and how his activism and how other public figures, were impacted by the FBI's surveillance, especially by J. Edgar Hoover, and how that all kind of links into what happened in the mid-80s and the changeover of the directors and everything, and trying to move away from that, but still having a lot of that prejudice present in the culture. I thought that was all really, really interesting. You know, it has a lot to do, too, with the fact that all of the FBI, like, gay tracking files were, like, terminated or destroyed, I believe, in the early to mid-70s, but as we probably know, you know, a lot of that, like, negative culture maintained, obviously, through the 80s, through the 90s, we still see a lot of that now, and so to see how it all links back to important things like James Baldwin being such a public figure and now a renowned author, I just thought that that was a really impactful piece of research, so just wanted to share with you what kind of things I'm researching today. And yeah, I know this has been a shorter little segment, day in the life. Kinda, as I'm sitting here now, I can't decide if I want to make this a day in the life or more of a longer vlog sharing with you, you know, throughout the week what I'm researching in addition to what I'm reading, so I might do that. I don't know, but I did some stretching and I'm going to kind of wrap up for the night. It's been a very long but very fun day, so I'm so glad that I've gotten to take you along, and I guess you'll be the one to know whether or not I am continuing this vlog into a multi-day thing or not, because you're watching, and you're gonna find out the answer in literally seconds. Okay. It'd be kind of funny if I just cut to an intro right here, or an outro. That would be an outro. That would be funny. It would be weird to cut to an intro.